The morning broke the way Boston mornings do in early October. Clean light on brick, a wind that made you zip your jacket one more notch, the faint smell of roasted coffee already threading the air. Claire Matthews was late, which is the only way she knew how to be when her calendar was full of meetings that treated her like a machine with a nice smile. Her phone vibrated with a buzz that felt judgmental. A reminder, Q4 brand strategy stand up in 12 minutes. She quickened her pace, boots clicking over the uneven sidewalk of Charles Street, hair pinned back in a way she hoped read as, together. She had slept 5 hours and dreamed in spreadsheets, which was something her college self would have mocked from a safe, messy distance. She cut down the side street to the cafe she'd loved when she was 20 and too romantic for her own good, Maple and Main a place with windows that caught the morning like a warm hand. She told herself she'd only grab a black coffee and go. She told herself a lot of things lately. Inside, steam and sound and a song from 6 years ago. The barista called next and Claire stepped forward, already reciting her order, when a voice behind her said her name like it had been practicing in her absence. Claire. She turned. The years fell away like leaves. Daniel, she said, and the syllables were a key fitting a lock she kept pretending she'd thrown away. He looked older and somehow exactly the same. Daniel Hayes, once a boy with paint on his hands and promises in his eyes, now a man with a low beard, sun-browned skin, and a quiet steadiness he hadn't owned at 22. He was taller than she remembered, or maybe memory had made him smaller to keep him safe. He wore a denim jacket and a black tee and the tired happiness of someone who had been awake thinking. Hi, he said, and the word was a full sentence. He reached for a smile, found it. Do you still come here? Sometimes, she managed. When I need to remember I'm a person. Same, he said. Not the remembering part. I try. He laughed softly, the same laugh that had once undone her at 3 a.m. under library fluorescence. The barista said, next, in a tone that suggested the show must go on. Claire stepped to the counter on legs that felt like they belonged to a different day. Daniel ordered 2. They stood side by side, the energy embarrassing and bright, and when their fingers brushed as they reached for sugar packets, she felt the ghost of 1,000 old sparks run up her arm. How long are you in the city? She asked. The last she'd heard, he'd been drifting between residencies in Santa Fe, Portland, and a small town on the California coast where the light had made him sentimental in his emails, back when they still exchanged them. He glanced at the window as if it might tell him. While, he said. My show opens next month. First big one in Boston. That's huge, she said and meant it. Congratulations. Thanks. He swallowed. You should come. She nodded automatically and then realized what she'd done and nodded again, slower, so it would count. They walked out together into air that bit their cheeks the way the fall pretends it's winter's cousin. The city looked like a photograph of itself, brick, iron, leaves just about to turn. They stopped near the corner where the light pooled, and in that thin moment between traffic flows, it was quiet enough to hear the world think. How've you been, Claire? He asked. Not the throwaway version. The real one. The question he used to ask on park benches with cold fries between them. She could have said fine. She could have said busy, which was Boston for drowning. Instead, she told a soft truth. I don't paint anymore. I know, he said, and the way he said it told her he had kept her somewhere in his life where he noticed things. I work a lot, she added, because the other truths were heavier and she had a meeting. Marketing. I write words that make other people's ideas look shinier. And do you still write the ones that are yours? He asked. Her smile faltered. Sometimes. In the notes app that never sees daylight. He watched her for a long beat, and in his eyes she saw the map of all the versions of her he had loved. The girl with paint in her hair, the woman with deadlines like little gods. You're still you, he said finally. It suits you. Across the street a tree lifted its arms like it wanted to catch the sky. A maple, not yet crimson, biding its time. She remembered the grove near campus, the way the leaves had turned the world into something you could believe in even when midterms lied to your face. She remembered a night under those trees, his hand warm on her knee, the word, forever, sounding reckless and perfect. Her phone chimed. Her life tugged her sleeve. She looked at him and felt time split and braid. "I have to," she started, and he nodded. "Of course," he said quickly. "You're busy." Listen." He pulled a small card from his jacket pocket, embarrassment crossing his features as if it felt like too direct a hope. "The gallery's on Tremont. The works, some of it is from now, some of it is from then." The pause. "You'll recognize a few." She took the card carefully, like it might ignite. "Hayes, the maple years it read in a smart serif. Opening in 4 weeks. A maple leaf sketched at the bottom like an afterthought that wasn't. "I'm with someone," she blurted, and then went hot because it wasn't what she meant and also exactly what she meant. "But he's good. I just thought I should say." Daniel's mouth softened. "I'm glad someone is good to you." The light changed. Cars moved. People did too. He stepped back. She did too, as if the choreography had been set years ago. "Take care, Claire," he said. "You too," she replied, holding the card like it was a small profit. She made her meeting, made her points, made lunches disappear at her desk, made jokes at 3 that kept her team from crying. She answered Mark's text, ***, dinner tonight? I'll cook, ***, please do, I'm dying. She lived this day like all the others, except for the part where her heart kept glancing backward as if something she'd dropped was calling her name. For the next week, Boston conspired. She saw Daniel everywhere and also nowhere, which is how memory works when it's awake. On Tuesday, she cut through the bookstore to avoid a fundraiser with canapes and relief. Daniel was in the poetry aisle, head bent, thumb following a line. He looked up as if he'd felt her walk in the door. He smiled like he'd forgotten how and then remembered. She waved, a small one, not the kind you use to stop buses. On Thursday, she crossed the common at lunch to prove she still believed the sun existed. He sat on a bench, sketchbook open, drawing a man throwing bread to pigeons like a myth. She walked past because some pains look like pleasures from a distance. On Friday night, she and Mark ate pasta in her narrow kitchen. Mark wore a soft gray sweater and the self-assured kindness of a man who had never had to prove he was one. He was a consultant with a gym routine and an apartment that looked like a catalog page. He laughed easily, asked about her day, massaged her shoulders as if he could knead out whatever the week had left behind. "You're far away," he said around the second glass of red. "I'm here," she lied, and changed the subject to a client with impossible expectations. He listened, nodded, offered a sensible solution. He was safe and she was grateful, and sometimes gratitude and love look like the same thing until you stand too close. That night she dreamed of a grove of maples, the leaves above catching the streetlight and making a cathedral of it. She woke with the taste of autumn on her tongue and Daniel's name in her mouth like a prayer and a curse. Claire had been 20 when they had filled each other's calendars as if time was infinite. He'd been the serious kid who could spend an hour looking at a shadow. She'd been the wild one who climbed roofs to talk to the moon. They had fallen into love as if it were a lake in summer. They'd swum until their fingers pruned. Then graduation came like winter, and Daniel left for a residency that paid him in light and ramen while she stayed in Boston for an internship that paid her in performance reviews and clean health insurance. They tried. They wrote, called, visited, waited. They made it a year and then distance and money and a small, stupid fight about a small, stupid thing, Thanksgiving plans, found all the fault lines and set them humming. They broke. They said the kind of things people say when their hearts are bruised and their pride is louder than their future. She kept the letters, he kept the Polaroids. They didn't speak. Now he was a gallery postcard in her coat pocket and a frequency in her week she couldn't tune out. She went to his show before it opened so she could breathe in it alone. She told herself she was scouting content for a client, which was ridiculous even for her. The gallery door was unlocked. The owner, a man with a linen shirt and the energy of sunlit water, let her in with a nod that said the world still had gentleness left if you looked. The Maple Years. The title was a flood. The paintings were big enough to be rooms and small enough to be held if you closed your eyes. Reds, golds, the complicated brown of leaves that he decided not to perform. A campus path that led nowhere and everywhere. Sky the color of phrases she hadn't learned yet. And there, a girl on a bench beneath a canopy of red, her knees tucked, her head down in the book that had saved her that week. Claire could smell the rain in the paint. She could hear Daniel's voice reading her the line he loved. She reached out and stopped herself a breath from the canvas, hand trembling like an apology. From behind her, "If you touch it, the gallery guy dies." She turned too fast and met the eyes she'd been avoiding. Daniel stood in the doorway, a messenger bag slung crossbody, a smear of umber at his wrist. He took in her face like a photograph and smiled without defending himself. "I couldn't wait 2 weeks," she said, voice soft, guilty. "Neither could I," he said, and came to stand beside the painting with her. "Is that?" she began. "It's you," he said, not letting her save herself. "It's from that week you thought you'd never be enough for anything, and I told you you were already enough for everything." Claire's eyes stung. She blinked hard because crying in spaces with good acoustics is a choice. "I was not easy to love." "You were not easy to convince," he corrected. "Loving you was the easiest thing I ever did." The room pulsed once, her heart loud in her throat. "Why call this the maple years?" she asked, though she knew. He looked at the ceiling, the way he does when he is trying to make his words hold weight. "Because everything that mattered started under those trees," he said. "Because every time I paint a color I love, it looks like October in Boston. Because we said forever there, and even though we didn't keep the word, it kept us. Because I couldn't name the show Claire without feeling like a thief." She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath since 21. "I can't do this," she said, barely, the confession spilling out. "I mean, I came, but I have a life, Daniel." "I know," he said. "I'm not asking you for anything. I'm asking if you still feel the thing I feel when you walk into a room." She could have lied. She wanted to. But the truth was bright and insistent. "I do." They stood with that truth between them like a small animal they both wanted to protect. He let it live. He didn't try to name it to death. He just nodded once, grateful. "Would you?" he began, then stopped. "There's a place I go when the noise in my head gets bossy. I think you know it." She did. The Grove. The maples that made Boston into a place that spoke in color. "When?" "Sunday," he said. "Noon. If it rains, better." She should have said no. She should have said she and Mark had plans, and they did, technically, brunch with friends and responsible laughter. Instead, she said, "Okay." When Sunday came, the sky obliged them with a light rain that made the world concentrate. Claire wore boots and an old green jacket and the courage of someone who had already lost the thing she feared losing. She texted Mark that she needed time to think. He called. She let it ring. She would tell him the truth later, gently, before it curdled. Today she owed the version of herself who had waited under those trees. Daniel was there first, because he had always been the kind who arrived early to make sure the space was ready for the moment. He stood with his hands in his pockets, the leaves above catching the rain and turning it into a sound like applause. When he saw her, he didn't grin. He breathed in and out, and she watched relief move through his body like weather. "You came," he said. "I came," she said, and for a second they were 20 again. A girl and a boy with futures like open doors. They walked the path in slow loops, the way you walk at a museum when the art is the person next to you. The conversation came in starts and stops, all the old languages learning how to speak again. "I was angry for a long time," she admitted, watching her boot break the thin film of water on a maple leaf. At myself. At the part of life that demanded we choose money over afternoons." "I know," he said. "I was angry too. I told myself you chose certainty over me, and then I realized I was asking you to choose uncertainty over yourself." She looked up. "You always did say it prettier." "I always had the easier job," he said. "I got to be poor and noble and sad in the sun. You had to be brave in fluorescent light." They reached the bench, their bench, and sat. The wood was wet, it didn't matter. He looked at her hands, at the small scar near her thumb she'd gotten opening a box the week they moved in together, at the way her fingers still twitched when she was keeping a thought in. "I painted you because I don't know how not to," he said quietly. "I kept your letters because I don't know how to throw away the parts of me you made," she answered, just as quiet. They laughed at the same time, the same small, incredulous laugh of people admitting they're not as tidy as they pretend. Then silence, the comfortable kind, the kind that says I know where you put your coffee in the morning without asking. Finally, she said the thing that had been waiting since the cafe. I'm with someone. He's good. I don't want to hurt him. I don't want you to hurt anyone, Daniel said. But we both know hurt isn't the only thing that happens when you choose wrong. You go quiet too. You go missing while staying. The rain drifted from drizzle to almost nothing. A leaf fell and landed on her shoulder like punctuation. She brushed it off and felt very young and very old at the same time. What if you and I do this again? She asked, voice thin with fear, and it breaks again. He took a breath and let it out slow. Then we will have been brave twice, he said. And I can live with that. I can't live with not trying because we were scared we'd fail. We're not 20, she said, half teasing, half begging time to be kind. We're not, he agreed. We're better. We know what it costs to leave and what it costs to stay. We know how to apologize to the minutes we waste. We know how to keep making coffee when it's not romantic. She looked at him then, really looked, and saw the lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, the way his hands had gotten steadier, the way he had aged into the man she thought he might be. She felt the version of herself she liked best sit up inside her and say yes. Daniel, she said, I didn't stop loving you. I got tired of losing to a calendar. His eyes went bright. Claire, he said, and her name in his mouth was a note she would carry for years. He reached up, slow enough to be stopped, and touched her face like a man touching a cathedral wall. She leaned in and kissed him under the maple sky, the rain just a rumor now, the city moving around them like a machine that had decided to let them be. It wasn't a fireworks kiss. It was better. It was the kind you build a room around. Quiet, sure, with a foundation you could put weight on. When they broke apart, they laughed again because joy sometimes wears surprise like a coat. Then the practicalities marched in, as they do. I have to talk to Mark, she said. You do, he agreed. He deserves the kindest truth you can tell. I hate hurting good people. I know, he said, and his thumb stroked the back of her hand like a promise. But you don't fix hurt by living a half-life. She nodded, heart doing a thing that felt like mourning and birth at once. Will you wait? I've been waiting in one way or another since I met you, he said, and the line should have been corny and was instead clean. I'll wait. Not forever. But long enough to let us be honest. They walked back through the grove with care, as if not to wake a sleeping animal. At the edge of the path, they stopped. The city sounds swelled, a siren somewhere, a bus, a woman laughing into her phone. People lived here. People fell in love and paid rent and learned hard lessons and came back from what hurt them. She went to Mark's later that day. She told the truth. He listened with quiet dignity that made her ache. He didn't shout. He didn't beg. He asked if she was sure. She said yes and then cried because certainty has grief in it too. He nodded and said he wanted her to be happy, even if he wasn't in the picture that happiness painted. They held each other for a minute like people hugging a version of a future they were putting down. When she left, she stood in the hall and breathed until her lungs stopped pretending they couldn't. Weeks moved the way they do when you've made a choice, faster and slower. She and Daniel didn't make a big announcement. They met for coffee and walked the city. They learned each other's new edges, how she needed silence in the morning until the second cup, how he needed light on the left side of the room when he sketched. They fought once about nothing and then apologized about everything and then laughed about how they kept wanting to perform the people they thought the other needed. The night of the opening, Boston decided to dress in wind. The gallery was warm with bodies and light. People stood with wine and pointed at paint like it had agreed to be decoded. Words floated, composition, saturation, breath, as if breath were a technical choice. Claire arrived alone, chin up, heart hammering. She wore a simple black dress and the courage of the girl on the bench. The gallery owner greeted her like an old friend because art people somehow always know who loves the artist. Daniel stood near the back, speaking to a couple in tailored coats, smiling his new, secret smile. When he saw her, his face changed in a way that made a woman nearby stop mid-sentence and follow his gaze. He crossed the room slowly, as if refusing to waste even one step. When he reached her, he didn't touch her right away. He looked at her like he was taking a picture for the inside of his ribs. "You came," he said again, and it was a life. "I came," she said, and it was another. He led her to a painting at the far wall. It was not the bench. It was new, and it was everything she'd been trying to say with her life. A woman stood on a small Boston street, head tilted up toward a slice of sky between buildings. Around her, the city was its busy, brilliant self: cars, bikes, a man holding a bag of oranges, a child dragging a red backpack. The sky above was cut by maple branches reaching in from the edge of the frame, leaves already red, the color heartbright. The woman's face, hers, was not soft or hard. It was open. "What's it called?" she whispered. Asterisk asterisk after the rain asterisk asterisk, he said. "You can name it if you want." She shook her head, eyes hot, throat thick. "It already knows what it is." They stood there for a long stretch of time, the kind that fills like a lung. People moved around them and didn't. The city outside breathed in and out. A late train rattled past somewhere, loyal and loud. She felt everything at once: loss, gain, fear, relief, and underneath it all, a layer of calm she hadn't known she could own. "You could go back to painting," Daniel said softly. "If you want." "I could," she said. "Or I could keep writing and let the paint come out sideways. I could do 100 things. I think that's the point." He smiled, the old one with the new steadiness. "The point is you don't go missing in your own life." She turned to him, and in that turning, the world slid a little more into the right place. "Stay," she said, and it was not a plea. It was a plan. He nodded, eyes bright, and kissed her forehead like an amen. They walked the gallery once more, then twice, then left together into a city that had decided to hold off on winter for one more night. The wind pulled at their coats. The maples along the street did that shimmering thing leaves do when they've just remembered they can let go. They crossed the common, the grass dark and the paths a soft white. Claire felt the year inside her shift. They passed a couple taking wedding photos under a street lamp, the bride laughing with her whole chest. They passed an old man teaching a dog to sit in the language only love makes you learn. They passed the bench in the grove and didn't stop because you don't have to build altars at places that have given you what you came for. On the bridge, she stopped and leaned on the cold rail, looking at the water black as ink and honest. Daniel stood close enough to be heat and not claim. She inhaled and then let it go. "Sometimes love doesn't fade," she said, more to the air than to him. "It just waits for us to be brave enough to return." He said nothing, which was exactly right. He put his hand in hers. They stood like that until the cold said go home. They did. Together. The winter came and was kind. The spring followed and brought the soft riot of green. They learned each other's groceries, each other's tireds, each other's small languages that make ordinary days holy. Claire still worked too much sometimes. Daniel still got lost in a line he couldn't get right. They forgot to buy milk and remembered to say sorry. They cooked, fought gently, made up like grown people who knew making up wasn't a movie scene but a decision to keep building. The maples turned again, red as a heart that won't quit. On an October morning, Claire woke to the sound of rain like applause and thought about how a life is just a collection of brave returns. She reached across the bed and found Daniel warm, his hand already reaching too, the two of them meeting in the middle like a bridge that had been there the whole time. Outside, the city went on, bright and busy, doing what cities do. Under a sky the color of memory, the leaves fell, and none of it felt like loss. It felt like a promise kept. It felt like an opening. It felt like love.